where right now all of you are naked. I just wanted to start with where Selva and I are coming from. Selva is from Istanbul, educated here in Los Angeles. I'm from Denmark, educated in the other end of the world here in Aarhus, as architects, by the way. We met each other at OMA. If our schools were, let's say, experiments, OMA is an experiment on steroids. Everything from the moment you step in here at OMA is about exploring and inventing new materials, new buildings, and so on. So yeah, even when we start designing a building, you don't not only have to reinvent the skyscraper, but you also need to reinvent the structure of it, the circulation of it, the programmatic distribution in it, and so on. So we were in this world of ultimate luxury of time and thinking.
And together we have worked on a theater building. This is in Dallas. And again, as Gregers was mentioning, even though architecture is a very slow technology, just responding back to what Tom was describing in nanotechnology and everything, actually, in terms of industries, probably architecture is the slowest one to change. But here we see a theater building, which it had to stand on 5, because we were so, again, ambitious with changing it, with doing something different. It had to only stand on 5 columns. Here you see how elegant those columns were. The facade had to be something newly invented. It couldn't be something that you have seen before. Even when you put in fluorescent lights, you had to do it in a different way. So this was a level of kind of ambition to do things differently with design. And it didn't only end it at building scale. It was also jumped to kind of even image of Europe was at stake. You could redesign the flag for European Union, and here you see that.
So, of course, as many designers experience it, there's a moment to leave, and we decided to leave for Istanbul. It was Copenhagen or Istanbul, but Istanbul seemed at that time to be the most challenging place to be, and maybe a rising technology, you can say. So we found ourselves here in 2006, trying to understand what is Istanbul. Selva has been away for 7 years. I was completely new. And from the people we met on the street, we got the notion that Istanbul is chaotic, it's never ending, we don't understand it, it's, what is Istanbul, Selva?
But in that sense, it's a great laboratory. So our interest was in trying to kind of open it up to discussion. Not that it hasn't been done before, but we thought we could do it a little bit differently. So one of the first things we have done, which Gregers will elaborate a little bit further, was to do a mapping project.
Yeah, so this is, you are all, as we saw now, slaves to the smartphone. But back in 2006, it was barely on the market, and for sure, the mapping technology was not there. So we got, repeatedly lost in the city using this old school type of technology. But still, we were interested in figuring how does the city work, because obviously it works. Everyone makes it to work every day. So it's not a city of catastrophe. So one system we found was the Domus and minibus. And we, let's say, naively made a map of it and tried to understand what it actually connects. And it was sort of an art project for us and a way to start engaging with the city's layers, or one of the many layers that keeps it going. We printed it, it was for sale.
It led to a much more serious project for us, which was this Mapping Istanbul book. The book consisted of about 70 maps. It was 2 years research with academic sort of researchers and NGOs, etc. And it looked at the connectivity of the kind of city at global scale, at local scale, national scale, and within itself. Here is one of the most kind of important maps in the sequence for me. This is work done together with Murat Güvenç. And here you see the education levels of our country. And we always talk about the East and West, but it's also something else to show it, right? So here you see the darker the color, the more educated the people are. So we looked at the growth of the city, we looked at what education levels do within Istanbul itself. This maybe follows a very expected pattern where you have views to the Bosphorus, you have more educated people, etc. But it's all of these things, I think, are to understand how a city behaves in some very simple format to start laying its layers on top of each other. Here you see the bus maps, and then this is all the street bazaars, which these things like the minibus to street bazaar, which we call the informal systems, are very dear to us because they actually are genuinely how the city is working.
Yeah, so saying that, I mean, one of the big drivers for initiating all the mapping was to understand the contemporary Istanbul. We were interested in figuring out really what is Istanbul today and not being, let's say, stuck in the nostalgia of the city. So finishing mapping Istanbul, it's part of an exhibition, and exhibition is one of the tools that we as architects have to, let's say, communicate some of these topics of the city. So here at SALT, we were asked to design the Becoming Istanbul show. There was a database we needed to interact with. There was a gaming space that needed to make people feel comfortable enough that they could shed the feeling that they were in an institution.
Oops, one back. Anyhow, then the next thing we did was to think through mobility for the future for Istanbul for Audi. And of course, Audi wanted us to talk about cars and traffic. We know there's traffic problems in Istanbul, but we thought that wasn't really the main issue, because this will be solved. I mean, we have enough confidence, I think, in the world, in technology, in smart data, whatever, that the traffic problem of Istanbul won't be there in, let's say, 10 years. But what we thought was the more important thing to talk about was this phenomenon, that the fact that we as pedestrians, so the persons that move, mobility, is actually always the one that's the compromised thing. And this is a very normal day in our neighborhood in Karaköy, and except that our friend is insisting on using the sidewalk, everything else nothing is staged. And no one was hurt. But we encourage everyone, basically the city is ours. The idea of the city is a lot about its streets. And we had this big thesis saying the future of democracy is in the streets, where cars have freed up space for park. So we all encourage kind of the ownership of streets from all of you, that this is actually, once in a while, maybe it's better to walk and to use a street. But this will come up as a kind of a thesis in many of the other projects we are doing also with Studio-X, which we'll get to soon. The mapping projects have had a new face for us now. We are doing them for a popular magazine called Oldu. It's a monthly, and we have a column in them. And we try to kind of create tools, very simple, stupid tools, like which buses go to which parks, or if you wanted to have bike lanes in Istanbul, where could you do them? Where would topography allow it to happen? And these are sort of things that we are playing around with.
Yeah. So in the design, again, going back to, let's say, the design that are in the city, we participate in some open competitions. So this was for a high school in Sicily. The ones of you who know Sicily knows that there's not a lot of green area. It's mostly in the backyards of schools or the cemeteries, but there's not, let's say, an overwhelming amount of green space. This was the building to be torn down and rebuilt. It was a dramatic location in the city. There was a 20-meter drop from one end to the other. There's a 40-story, I believe, high-rise in the other side. So in many ways, a super exciting spot. Like in Denmark, if there's a half a meter change on the elevation on the site, I mean, it's a kind of a miracle. So here we actually had, just by the sheer slope of the site, a 5-story building. So we were interested in saying, how can the topography that often is in Istanbul is used as an obstacle? We need to dig into it or make big plateaus. How can we make a school that is actually using the terrain and becomes let's say, integrated part of the landscape, and also stitches the city back together? It doesn't become another void, another little enclave. It can actually be used by the city and the citizens to walk through. We got a fun remark at the end of it, which points at the things we really want to do and interest is like, so we like your proposal, but we're not there yet.
I think you should also elaborate a little bit on the TaylorCrete project, which allows the technology to build these complex shapes.
Yeah. So we've been part of for the last 4 years in a project called TaylorCrete. It's built into the old narrative of File to Factory, the 30-year discussion of how we can advance our technology, and we're hearing it's happening already, and it surely is, and as designers, we are part of it. So one of the things that developed in that project was a plugin for a design tool we use to actually know already what kind of formwork this project could be built with. We are hopefully patenting one technology which is using wax as formwork, but also advancement in, let's say, current state-of-the-art types of formwork were made. And of course, when you start talking about, let's say, complex shapes in concrete, we need to also do advancement in the reinforcement of it. So robots here are taking over the role that humans can no longer have when we have 3D bent rebars or structural members. We're now building this up in Denmark. This was the fall. You see assembling on the construction site. Here is some of the formwork in styrofoam coming up. And here last week, we just took the last piece of formwork off the thing.
So then we come to Studio-X. I think what we wanted to show with the work we have done previously at Superpool is to show that we created our own agenda. We wanted to do something to carry on the habit of thinking through design, and we knew there's not always clients for this, especially if you want to think at city scale. No one really comes and asks you to do a minibus map. But what happens if you want to do it, and if you end up doing it, is that you create a piece of knowledge that is very crucial. No one has really done it before. And suddenly you realize actually there is a market for it in a funny way. I mean, it's not a big market, it's not something that makes you rich or anything, but there is an interest in this discussion because we all share the same city and we all want to kind of learn about the city, be in it in a more enjoyable way. And then this leads kind of from one research to the other. And the other path, the path of kind of the material research that Gregers has showed with the TaylorCrete project, also has very wide opportunities available. So all of those come together in a new place now in Istanbul. We're very proudly here to kind of announce it to you. It's opened only in November. It's an initiative of Colombia University. And we have the kind of the honor of directing it for a couple of years. It's in Salı Pazarı. This is from our opening party, which was really very well attended. We were very happy that already there is a community for engaging with the space. The idea of a Studio-X is basically that it can do all of these things. It can look like a book gallery, it can be a coffee shop, it can behave like an office. But what it actually does is, to repeat the dean's words, is actually it reinvents the university of the future. The idea of universities has to change, as everything else has to change. What we also heard from Tom's description, education is also industry, it also has to reinvent itself. And in some ways, it also has to democratize, right? So it has to be everywhere in the world. And the way, at least Colombia decides to be everywhere in the world is not like Starbucks. And it's not to say I will go and sell the same coffee everywhere in the world, but it is to say I will allow a different discussion to come up in different locations, and I will learn from that discussion. So Studio-X is one of 6 full Studio-X's and 2 labs around the world. What it does is it's a platform for project proposals where we can develop ideas together with all of you, and which we look forward to having you in the space as well. Already we have established several programs. One is about preservation. We think Istanbul needs deeply to think about its past. And for that we have done several exhibitions already. One was Cemetery of Architects, where we were looking at modernization period architects. Here you see kind of the flyer of the exhibition, and this is some images from the exhibition itself. It came along with a book that looked at the Armenian photographer from İstiklal Caddesi for 50 years. We have a library we initiated. We're deeply interested in participation games, like serious gaming will be a big theme. We started already to work with children because they are the next generation users. Obviously, when you ask them to describe their city, they draw a lot of roads. And it's very important to talk about a livable, lovable data city. I think the livable, lovable is very, very important. We need to think and love our city and think how we can do things to actually further enhance a lovable city. And this will come as a project for imaginable guidelines we're doing together with our architect Alexis Chanel. Security regimes is another system we started, a kind of a theme. We looked at Guantanamo and prisons in Turkey. What are actually the closed spaces that we are building? And how do they work? So we will leave you with a small video. This is from before the space was ready. Actually only 3 weeks before we opened.